can't find it.
It's live, right? This is it? Another episode of the Sonic Truth Dynasty-focused fantasy football podcast. On the Player Profiler Network, I'm Alan Zaslowski, moderator of the Sonic Truth podcast, along with Theo Greminger and the Podfather. We have a long list of Dynasty topics to discuss today.
And non-Dynasty topics.
Well, I was going to say, and stay tuned, because in about 12 to 15 minutes, Podfather got himself in a little bit of hot water on social media. We're going to untangle that, meme wars, quote wars. So hang around in about 12 minutes.
It was on this show.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is the show. I got in trouble on this show. Not really. Not actually. We'll get to this later. No one on this show that was listening or in the comments even took notice of the segment. But then somehow when it got clipped for social media, a weird phenomenon happened.
I guess
so
we're going to talk about
we're going to hit that from every angle later in the show.
Well, I predict more viewers than the Aaron Rodgers, Pat McAfee appearance to untangle this one, Theo. But let's start with a couple Dynasty topics just to get our beak wet a little bit, guys. Kadarius Toney's been one of my favorite picks in these Dynasty startup drafts. Nobody wants him high floor, low as hell ceiling.
High floor? Low? What?
High ceiling, low floor. Sorry.
No. What? Why, we're starting off the show with fake news? Is this what we're doing?
We've already seen Kadarius Toney's high ceiling, right? Haven't we already seen it?
We've seen some boom games.
They were unforgettable booms.
We had the rookie year boom game against Dallas was somewhat unforgettable, Alan. That was like the Kadarius Toney.
Right.
That's like the memory game where, you know, people really want to hang on to it. But yeah, there's some buzz on your boy Toney. He's getting some buzz from Kansas City right now.
He had 13 targets in his rookie year. He had close to 200 yards receiving, including 137 air yards, and he had a top 5 fantasy week. That's the ceiling outcome. That's what everyone's chasing. This is a player with a terrifyingly low floor. Most weeks he does absolutely nothing. Commands 3 targets, is a gadget player, has been a gadget player his entire career going back to his time at Florida. But there are these games out there where he does have, you know, the 4 wheels, and he can make huge plays even after the catch. He's just not refined. He was not a player that the Giants even wanted around. And that is the quint. He's more hurt than not, more often in the training room than not on the sideline. So this is the quintess. I mean, I couldn't even in fiction create a player in a lab. If this was like a Marvel movie, Alan, for a player with a high ceiling and a 0-point floor. I don't know what the hell you're talking about going the other direction with this. He's a high ceiling player with a what?
Well, let me give you the
low
quote.
Ceiling player. Wait, no. You said he's a high floor. I can't even get my head around this.
Low floor.
You said he's a high floor player with a low ceiling.
Well, he's a potential high ceiling weekly play that has a scary floor. The floor is like, I think that's Matt's fear is the floor. Alan's taking a very optimistic outlook with Toney, which a lot of people are, including maybe the Chiefs. And Matt is having the pessimistic, kind of realistic viewpoint of a guy that's given us pretty much 0, and broke our hearts also last year when he made it into our lineups when we expected the role to expand. So I can kind of see both sides.
And he is what we thought he was pre-draft.
Yep.
This is what I am reticent to ever, shift my process on. Go full Bayesian here. No. I'm walking away from my priors. Things have changed. Information's changed. The Chiefs are all in on this guy. I would be open to that. But in this case, we're talking about a guy who was a full fade pre-draft, and then he's put up nothing for 2 years except one game that we can remember.
Yeah. And that tantalizing upside is tough to ignore. He just looked like a human joystick on the floor. Now, also, the price is right on Toney. In redraft, what is he, like an 8th round pick? I'm sure he'll be moving up with the quote, Theo, that said that here, I have it right here. It was Jeremy Fowler reported from ESPN that the Chiefs believe Kadarius Toney can be the number one type wide receiver that they're looking for this season. Now, if they get DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, and we're going to talk about Hopkins momentarily, that goes away. But it's not like you're having to take Toney in the 4th round of these startup drafts in single QB. You're taking him as like wide receiver 45. It's almost like a different kind of version of Will Fuller. That's what I want in my wide receiver 3. I want to put a guy in there that can go 0 or 28 and win me the week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I would take more shots on Kadarius Toney in redraft than I would Dynasty. Because I think that right now the situation in Kansas City is there's like some ambiguity as to like the wide receiver targets. Because Rashee Rice we haven't seen yet. We don't know if Sky Moore is taking a big step forward in year 2. And Toney, like the biggest argument is he's got a chance to lead the wide receiver room in Kansas City in targets. But I think like a year from now, they'll continue to add talent there. And, Rashee Rice could also be really, really good. Rashee Rice could leap Toney in dynasty value within like the first 2 games of the season. Like
yeah.
it wouldn't
He's
it wouldn't
better
be
than
anything.
Kadarius Toney right now at playing wide receiver. Like that's the thing, right? Kadarius Toney's not a good receiver. Like he was a running back in college that converted to receiver, and they were trying to train him at the Senior Bowl to play receiver. They were showing him stuff, right? They were showing him like technique that you would learn in your freshman year in college at the Senior Bowl. And then they tried to continue that development process in New York, and they gave up on him, Alan. So what do you think's going to happen with Kadarius? Like, close your eyes. What do you think's going to happen? You think in 2 years you're going to look up and this guy's going to be this steady weekly producer, or he's going to be like the wide receiver 14? He's going to be Patrick Mahomes #1. Do you really see that? No, that's not what's going to happen. This is a talk yourself into rainbows and butterflies scenario.
Yeah. He's my truther player, I guess, that you're making me realize, because I can't unsee what I saw, but I acknowledge fully that he could be out of the league in 2 years, right? I mean, he's Martavis Bryant. I couldn't quit that guy for a long time either.
That's right. Well, but just the Will Fuller comparison makes sense just based on boom upside and injury history. But Will Fuller was a refined receiver. He was a killer at Notre Dame, right? He was smashing and he was winning in all quadrants in college and then in Houston. So he was winning not just with his speed, but also with his technique on the outside. Very different receiver from Kadarius Toney. He's more of an inside gadget player who's going to be used close to the line of scrimmage, and who does not have the refinement down the field of a Will Fuller. My God, no.
All right, Theo, put a bow on this here. Where do you advise dynasty startup drafters to take Kadarius Toney, or is he a full fade of where he is? Is he, let's say you're in a portfolio of leagues, you're doing $50 leagues, $100 leagues, $200 leagues. Do you want at least a couple shares of him in your dynasty portfolio at all?
I'm not opposed to rostering some Kadarius Toney. I think that the market is probably correct, though, Alan, where in redraft, he's maybe being treated like a wide receiver 3, but in Dynasty, he should absolutely be treated as like a wide receiver 4, where it's more like guys we're kind of hopeful for. For instance, I think that right now in Dynasty, you can trade Kadarius Toney for some of these second-round wide receivers that we have higher hopes for. Like, I think if there's not the buzz that we have and the like enthusiasm that we have for Jaden Reed at Player Profiler is not shared by a lot of as many managers as you would think. The Marvin Mims love is there, but I think you could flip Kadarius Toney to get a Jaden Reed. You could flip Kadarius Toney plus. For some managers, gets the conversation started on Marvin Mims, even though I think that's a lot more difficult to pull off. So I don't know. I think I would.
Kadarius Toney went ahead of Marvin Mims in a startup that Alan and I are in right now.
I took. Oh yeah, in that one, right.
Oh, right. So we're in a startup right now, and Toney went ahead of Mims.
Not that one. It was the one that we started after the cheapo. Well, Theo is a high stakes player. He doesn't like these $50 leagues. So this is like
I have respect. I have respect for all leagues, Alan. Respecting all leagues. But yeah, I don't get too mixed up in the 50s.
Well, we wouldn't even get him to open up the app if it was a $50 league. I understand. Listen, I understand. I have leagues like that as well. All right, let's break here, guys, because when we come back, we're going to address Podfather's latest controversy and the social media backlash that he often gets. And Theo, maybe our guys just misunderstood. But first, let's take a word from one of our sponsors.
Oh, baseball season's heating up. It's all about baseball right now. Baseball. Yeah, baseball is the most exploitable of the sports, especially on Rival Fantasy, rivalfantasy.com. Go there now. They have the fantasy book where you can take over under a certain number of fantasy points, and they have challenges where you can take player X or player Y. I get great pleasure out of fading Mike Trout into oblivion. And then don't forget about Fantasy Bingo, where you can say, okay, I think Acuna's going to steal a base today. I think that Freddie Freeman's going to have 2 hits based on the matchup. The lefty-righty and the pitcher quality matchups that you could exploit are unlike any other sport. Go to rivalfantasy.com. Use the promo code PLAYER. They refund any losses up to $50, and they are a great supporter of Player Profiler. Everything we do, this show in particular, is only possible because of Rival. Rivalfantasy.com. The promo code is PLAYER.
We're back on the Sonic Truth Fantasy Football Dynasty-focused podcast. I'm Alan Seslowsky of RotoWire.com, along with Theo Greminger and the controversial Podfather, who... Some people want to try to cancel you, Podfather. Why don't we just pass the mic over to you, right?
Can I first preface this before Matt speaks?
Some people.
I didn't know about this until this morning, and I was on the podcast.
You were on the podcast.
Yeah,
Theo.
I was on the podcast.
Yeah, you don't even remember what was said. You're like, what was this? Was this on my show?
Well, why don't we explain? There's people already confused about what's going on. So, Podfather, why don't you just lay out, as if someone is tuning in for the first time, what happened? Go back to last week's Sonic Truth. Start there.
No, I'm not going to start there. I'm not going to start there. On the Player Profiler Twitter account, everyone should be following at Roto Underworld on Twitter. A quote graphic, which is quoting me from the Sonic Truth show, was posted. And it read as follows. Antonio Gibson is James Conner without the cancer.
I didn't hear you say that, Matt. I was right here in this chair.
Well, it doesn't matter if he said it or not. It matters because the company in which the backlash is because the company that Matt founded and owns put out a tweet that Matt said. So it's autumn. And by the way, this is a lesson in social media. Just because you read it doesn't mean it's true. But if you're consuming that, I'm going to assume it's true because all the other quotes have been true.
That's right. So if we now go back in the time machine to last week or 2 weeks ago, the show we did, last week, I said that James Conner is currently the most underrated running back in the NFL, that he has an all-purpose skill set, that he's set up to be a workhorse, and that I have always had sort of a special place with James Conner. He was the first Devy pick I ever had. My first Devy league was James Conner when he was at Pitt, and then he famously beat cancer before going on to become a workhorse in the NFL. And we were gushing about James Conner and what a great value he is and what a great player he is. And then we pivoted to talk about Antonio Gibson, and it struck me. I was like, wow, look at Antonio Gibson has the size. Antonio Gibson has the all-purpose skill set. Antonio Gibson is currently underrated across the industry, across football. I was like, wow, he is similar to James Conner in that way, just without the cancer part. But when we go and we clip quotes for the shows, just to take everyone into the production studio, we don't clip these things verbatim. We don't quote verbatim. We massage the quote so that it has a great ring to it in text. Some things that are said have a better ring to them than when they're written. So some things you read are funnier if the text is moved around, if it's more concise, if you change it around a little bit. So what we did was we changed the quote slightly for social media to maximize engagement. This is just a little bit of behind the scenes, how the movie magic is made at Player Profiler. So then this goes up on social media, and sure enough, people are engaging with it. We're getting, Josh Hermsmeyer, look at this asshole, right? It's just one thing after another. Like people I think at one point, did I hear that Nate Liss liked a tweet saying cancel the Podfather?
I'd have to find the tweet, but yeah, I think there was a lot of people liking a specific tweet, and it was somebody I don't know. So,
was it the real Nate Liss or was it fake Nate Liss? Because there's a Nate Liss. Is there a Nate Liss impersonator on Twitter?
I didn't go too much into the depths of this, guys. I was busy this morning, and I noticed these cancel, the Podfather, tweets, and I was like, what is going on here? But
and by the way,
we are still here. We're still here,
Theo,
guys.
I help these guys. I help work with these guys in the back room sometimes. Subscriptions went up yesterday, not down. Up. Yeah. There was a little bump after that, by the way. So
that's
it was
right.
The people trying to cancel the cancel people. So that sometimes is, that sometimes does happen.
The most difficult part of the situation was I had to fire the intern, and he was so close to those college credits, and he's just not going to get them. And I, apologies to the school we will not name.
Yeah, it was just fun to watch everything play out exactly as you would hope if you're in my position, right? You're like, well, man, I hope this gets engagement. It's going to get engagement for all the wrong reasons, but the engagement's still engagement. And some people might find it funny. Some people are. My favorite comedian is Anthony Jeselnik, and actually, there's a fantasy analyst at NFL.com, I believe, who's like good friends with Anthony Jeselnik. They do a podcast together. Isn't that right?
So I know Jeselnik. I don't know about the podcast.
Yeah, I think he's at NFL Network.
I just want
Rosenbaum. I'm struggling to
the worst thing, by the way, they could accuse you of here is making a bad joke. If they want to accuse you of making like a not funny joke, fine. But I think the intentions here were not to. Again, that's I guess because I know you. I know Theo knows you as well. So we're not sitting here just like just talking the company line. Like I said, if someone wants to say it was like a not funny joke, we could accept that.
Yeah, it was, again, for anybody who's worked up, like Alan and I didn't even realize any of this stuff because it didn't happen. And I'd invite anybody to go back and watch last week's episode and try to find any kind of controversy. We've talked about all kinds of things, from lunch ladies to maybe some controversial Vegas bachelor party ideas.
I'm getting horny again. Stop it. Stop it.
But this one definitely has a little bit of buzz, which I don't really anticipate sticking around too long, but we'll see.
The show is the Jeselnik and Rosenthal Vanity Project. Greg Rosenthal was one of the original sort of OG fantasy analysts. He started at Roto World many years ago with Matthew Berry and all the original Evan Silva, the big hitters from Roto World that went on to have huge fantasy careers. Greg Rosenthal is now a co-host and good friends with Anthony Jeselnik. And if there's one person in this industry that I'm jealous of, it's Greg Rosenthal, because Anthony Jeselnik is my favorite comedian. So whenever like a comedic line has a Jeselnik vibe, I'm a big fan of it. And I'm a big fan of these kinds of troll tweets because they expose the frauds in the industry, like the Josh Hermsmeyers of the world, right? Where it is just the fakest outrage possible. Like, this isn't real. Like, what do you think? Do you think that I actually don't respect cancer victims? Is that what you're like? That's the thing. Like, what do you really think? Like, if you're waving a flag on social media that you're against this thing that was said, right? Or you're against this quote graphic, okay? So that's fine. That's you, okay? Making sure that people know that you care about cancer victims. Great job. Good for you. But what do you think about the guy on the other side of this? Do you think that he doesn't respect them? Right? And the answer is, of course not. Of course, my grandmother died at a young age in her early 40s, left my Uncle Kevin at 7 years old, and so you don't know me. You don't know anyone that's making a joke on social media. You don't know what they actually think. That's the whole point, is that these people that are replying and are signaling how great they are to the world, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Wait for Podfather's tweet next week where he says, "Screw the troops." All right, let's move on, guys. Let's move on.
We're not moving on.
You said it. You said it.
This is. I just think this is so perfect. It really. I mean, it was. Can we read some of these? Can we please? David B writes karma.
Put it up on the screen.
Trey Turner writes, "Nah, that's unacceptable." They're right. They don't listen to the show. 100 out of 100 people in here do not listen to the show at all. L account. Okay. And this other guy's like, then we have people that are saying, well, what is the actual context? They're actually asking, they're trying to dig in. What's the context? Then Michael, there's one guy in the comments that actually did listen to the show. He's like, well, 5 minutes earlier, they were gushing over Connor being the greatest grinder ever for overcoming cancer to be a workhorse RB. That's the context. So now everyone's like, this is what you want. You want people who are not listening to the show to go, well, maybe this is unfair. Maybe he doesn't actually disrespect cancer victims. Maybe they're the people that are talking out of their ass. Maybe they have no idea what they're talking about, right? And so they're sanctimonious suckers is what they are, that they fall for this shit. They think that that's actually what was said, and they think it was said in a mean way, but they don't listen to the show. These people, like Josh Hermsmeyer, are sanctimonious suckers. And all I would say is 2017 called, and they want their fake outreach tweet back.
And we didn't hear one complaint from a single person who listened to the podcast or watched the pod on YouTube. So like the people that actually watch it, we didn't hear one single complaint. So it's, and people will complain if they don't like something. We'll get a DM saying what a terrible take, and nobody said a single thing about this. So I don't know. It was very odd. I have my little morning routine before the Sonic Truth pod, and I noticed these tweets. I'm like, what is going on here? So glad we're still here, Matt. I'm glad we're still here.
And Jack Kavanaugh runs the Twitter account, and Jack Kavanaugh he had to do like a heat check with me. He was like, "Are you sure this is what we want?" I'm like, "Jack, this is amazing. Do not feel," because I could tell he was getting a little nervous. And that's the thing. People like Billy was getting a little nervous. Jack was getting a little nervous. Everyone's like, guys, should we, is this what we want? Should we consider deleting this tweet? And I'm like, everybody, this is a great learning experience. This is exactly what we need to be leaning into, because then we can talk about this on the next show. We can talk about what, like Gunny writes, does context even matter in this case? Yes, Gunny, it does. It does. And again, you should consider listening to the show to hear exactly what was said and how it was said. Billy Sports Prod says, I don't know what the context was. This was horrible. This is my favorite one, though. This is great. Handsome Dan writes, yes, this is making it better, Matt. How is it out of context? As people who didn't hear the context have no idea. Well, then you should go listen to the show. Then that's the solution. Also, he writes, whoever is running that account, shouldn't you take it up with them personally and not at them on Twitter? Because remember, my tweet was, knock it off, Roto Underworld. I run this company. You guys are embarrassing me every day with out-of-context tweets. As if did they really think this handsome Dan thinks that I was actually not in on it and that I was criticizing my own company from my Twitter account and that I was legitimately upset that this got out there when I'm the one that wrote it. I'm the one that wrote it. I'm the one that submitted it to Jack to post. I'm doing it all. I am taking all the arrows for what's in the best interest of the company. And what's in the best interest of the company are listeners to this show. Because when you start listening to this show, for whatever reason, you were just curious to see, did I really say that? How is he going to react? How is he going to respond? Whatever it is, you're going to listen as long as it's on. Right, Theo? The first time you listened to the show, the first time Alan listened to the show, you guys subscribed to the show, and then you were listening every week. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
So, we're putting out the best Dynasty podcast on earth right now, Matt. It's kind of hard to stop listening to it.
So this is all by design, and yet, even though it was by design, I didn't even imagine it would go this well. I wouldn't have imagined that we would have got Josh Hermsmeyer. I wouldn't have even imagined. I couldn't imagine. Like, how? How could I have known that it could have gone this well?
Yeah. Tune in next week to find out which fantasy football players Podfather says have syphilis and herpes. Okay, that's gonna be next week.
Next episode. Matt Club Seals.
Yeah,
alive on camera.
Right.
YouTube,
I bet you would. I bet you if you would have said herpes, it would have been funnier.
No.
I hear my wife laughing in the other room by that now.
I think it was perfect as is. I would not change a thing. Let's put it that way.
All right. You know who is going to be changing some things, guys? DeAndre Hopkins. We're going to find out. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, right now there's an arms race between the Bills and the Chiefs. I'm interested to see what happens with the dynasty reaction for DeAndre Hopkins. I fell for a fake news story last night, Theo. Thank God. You didn't even tell me. You just let me sit in it for a little bit when I thought he signed with the Jets. I got totally swindled.
We got the record set pretty quickly. I don't know how somebody got you, Alan. You've been doing
I'm
this
a Jets
for so
fan.
long. You're hopeful for D-Hops, but it's going to be Buffalo or Kansas City,
right? And I believe, and it sounds like Buffalo is the one. I mean, if that's what it's leaning towards. So now, Stephon Diggs was in that Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, like the 29, 30-year-olds level of dynasty, Cooper Kupp, where they were still going. Does DeAndre Hopkins pull Stephon Diggs out of that, or does DeAndre Hopkins get pushed into that tier for dynasty fantasy football, guys?
So if it's Buffalo, it's a very interesting landing spot. I think that it's a slight hit to Diggs if Hopkins goes there. A slight hit. Diggs has had a tremendous amount of success since he's got there, but he's had such a high amount of targets. DeAndre Hopkins would be a weekly target hog. I mean, he's done it every single year. The guy's going to be top 20 in targets per game when he's out there. So I think it would be a slight knock to Diggs. I think that the counter argument could be it supercharges the offense a little bit. So Diggs might have some more opportunities for touchdowns. But yeah, I think that it would be a very good landing spot for Hopkins. But to me, Kansas City would be the ideal landing spot for Hopkins because, all the things we've talked about with the, we're searching for it with Kadarius Toney. We're searching for it with, Rashee Rice, being hopeful for him. Like D-Hops would be, in my opinion, it would be a higher ceiling outcome for him to go to Kansas City. But either one is a really, really good outcome, to be attached to one of those quarterbacks.
How does he not go to Kansas City? Like, how does that not happen? If he has money, right? He's made millions. He's had a couple big contracts already that he's banked the cash. He needs to go win a championship now, right? Isn't that what he wants to do? Doesn't he want to play with Patrick Mahomes? They have Kadarius Toney and a rookie. Really? This is perfect. I mean, it would be so perfect. And also, he wouldn't have to carry the alpha role because he would share it with Travis Kelce. At this point in your career, when you're in your 30s, you don't want to carry the alpha role. It's beyond perfect. I don't know how it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's a little odd because you'd think you would have a lean towards the Super Bowl champions if you're chasing a Super Bowl. But I do think that Buffalo is a very attractive spot for him. They were one of the rumored teams to get him earlier in the summer, so we don't know if anything behind the scenes of, does he like Josh Allen? I don't know. It's either way. I mean, it's Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. So for DeAndre Hopkins, it's a big dynasty win because if they go out and get him, I don't think it's going to be for the year. I think it's a 2-year window for him. It kind of expands his window slightly. And again, you'd be putting him next to one of the top, 2 or 3 quarterbacks in Dynasty. So it would be fantastic. it's super, super excited. Alan, there's a couple of dark horse teams. Do you buy into that, or do you think it's a two-horse race?
Oh, totally. I think that he can go, because I haven't heard him say anything about chasing a ring. I could see him go into a crappy team where he's guaranteed 165 targets and any dollar amount he wants. Tennessee, go back to Houston. Bill O'Brien's not there anymore, right? I mean, he could go that route too, where he just gets the complete bag of dough and just gets as many targets as he wants.
The Patriots were thrown out there early in this process.
Does he hate Bill O'Brien, though? Don't they hate each other?
I don't know. I think that money goes a long way, and New England certainly could pay him. So I don't know. I think it's going to be one of the top two. There's always a chance it could be a last-minute team. I hope we have clarity of this sooner than later.
What about Detroit? Detroit opens the season against Kansas City. The league has acknowledged that they're the next team that's coming. They're the next playoff team that's come up, has risen out of obscurity. Jamison Williams is suspended for the first few games, and Jamison Williams is a field stretcher. Jamison Williams, when he played last year, was getting 1 or 2 targets, and he was in a pure field stretching role, trying to create more opportunities underneath for the other receivers. I think Hopkins would be perfect. They're missing a Hopkins.
Yeah, I saw a funny
role.
tweet.
They have no one that can go out and play X and win in contested situations. That's not a archetype that they even have on the roster. I think it would be. I don't know why Detroit's not in the conversation. They might be. Maybe Detroit isn't. They have money. They have cap space. They have everything they need.
Yeah, let's wrap it with this. I saw a great tweet, guys, that said, you know which team would be a great team for DeAndre Hopkins? Any of the 32, right? He'd be great on all teams. And all teams would want him.
This is also a window into our process, because some we would ask, why don't you have Kadarius Toney in your top 50 dynasty receivers? Why don't you have Gabriel Davis? Right? Look at the teams they're on. Look at the projected targets this year. Look where they're going in redraft. And it's like, well, here's the thing. And I talked to Rich Rebar about this on many shows. And Theo and I talked about this a lot behind the scenes. The starting point is, are you good? Right? That's the starting point. If you're good, then we can start to talk about where you land and where you slot in against other good players. Right? We know Toney and Davis aren't good. They've been inefficient, unavailable for years. Okay, yeah. And underwhelming outside of one game a couple years ago for Toney and one game in the playoffs for Gabriel Davis, right? There are some players we suspect are not good, but we need to see it on an actual NFL field before it's confirmed, like Jonathan Mingo. So therefore, Jonathan Mingo is rated ahead of those guys. But as soon as we start to see inefficient play from Jonathan Mingo, then he's going to be in that classification too. So that's just a great example of two players who are now at risk of cratering in Dynasty. This is why you can't chase this coming year opportunity in Dynasty, because at any given moment, Hopkins gets cut. The next thing you know, he's rumored to go to the team for the guy you just drafted in a startup 3 rounds too early. And this is one of the reasons why our rankings are the best.
All right, it's a good place to stop it there for that conversation, because there's been some pushback on Travis Etienne this week, guys. Right, the quote was that the coaches don't want to see him play 74% of snaps. Now we see Tank Bigsby, Theo, drafted with pretty decent draft capital. What was it, the 3rd round in the real NFL draft? So,
yeah,
as fantasy analysts, we put those together and we say, oh man, they drafted this guy to take over Travis Etienne's a good chunk of his workload. But let's untangle what it really means, because I'm following some of the redraft rankings and the dynasty startup stuff too. Etienne falls a little, Bigsby goes up a little. What's the correct reaction for dynasty fantasy football?
I think that's the correct reaction. I think it's like I wrote about Etienne losing value as one of the 5 players I thought lost some dynasty value post NFL draft. And
good
now
article, by the way. Good
I
article.
appreciate that.
That's on Theo's timeline, both the gainers and losers. And I know a lot of people write risers and fallers article, but this is pretty detailed, and he points out the key players. Read that article.
Well, we'll also put it in the show notes as well.
Okay.
I appreciate that, guys. So for me, it's like we all talked about like Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet being drafted, and Ken Walker was like the one that everybody wants to talk about. Whereas the ETN one, you get kind of like a little bit of pushback, but now you're starting to see it, and it's starting to get reflected in the redraft rankings and also the dynasty rankings. We had to move ETN down a little bit. We did it on Player Profiler. Like, it just makes sense if they're going to spend draft capital on take Bigsby. It is a little bit more of a threat than Dearness Johnson and JaMychal Hasty. I think the other thing with ETN is he has the 7% target share. So adding any kind of a threat there to a guy that's like sub 10% target share is difficult. Bigsby produced in the SEC. Bigsby has size. He has receiving ability, and he did it on some pretty bad Auburn offenses. So, like, I don't dislike Travis Etienne, but I do think that this is a threat to him. And I think that Doug Peterson, the last time he had a back that was a threat to Etienne, we had those James Robinson weeks at the beginning of the season. I don't think it's going to be that, but I do think that we like the talent of Etienne more than the actual production that we've seen. And now we have a more threatening backup running back there. And Alan, to your credit, like, redraft has reacted really quickly with this. Like, Etienne hasn't shot down because the running back market in redraft is kind of funny. Like, Etienne still is a third year back. He's still a guy that produced last year. Like, he hasn't like cratered, but you are seeing Tank Bigsby being drafted with like the elite handcuffs. Bigsby's an 11th round pick in like $350 FFPC redraft leagues right now. So there's usually a little bit of a correlation right there. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Matt, your thoughts on this?
If Travis Etienne had a higher target share, he would be much more insulated.
Yes.
The problem is a lot of his value is derived from just a huge touch share in general, a carry share as well, because he was commanding a lot of his opportunity share was huge. Like, he was dominating that backfield. You just had JaMychal Hasty jumping in for 6 targets here and there, but the carries were going to Etienne. Bigsby's initial threat is going to be taking carries away, being in there for every third drive, potentially going in there in short yardage situations. It's not good. It's not good. It can offset. It's possible that Etienne, in his second year in the league, decides that he's going to, double his, weekly targets. That would be great. That it's possible based on what he did in college. It's highly unlikely, but that's really the path. It's like a guy is going to show us receiving skills in the NFL that we haven't seen at this level before from him. So there's a very low probability of that happening, but there's a much higher probability that Bigsby cannibalizes significant touches from Etienne. I don't love it.
Podfather, would you rather have Najee Harris or Travis Etienne in Dynasty if you're doing a startup right now?
I would rather have Etienne, and it's a great question because they were both drafted in the first round in the same draft class.
That's why I asked. That's what.
And it's just this offense, if things break right for Etienne in this offense, if he does improve his target share, for example, I mean, he is an explosive first-round talent. In this offense, it's tantalizing. And Najee Harris is never going to have the kind of ceiling, league-winning ceiling that Etienne still has. So that would be the reason why. But it's now, like Theo said, it's closer for sure.
You saw Najee Harris's best fantasy season as a rookie. Like, I don't think he'll hit that 17 points per game mark. Harris is a useful player. We also like the offense better. Like, Jacksonville's offense could be a top 5 offense this year if it falls right. They're a top 10 offense last year. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's super interesting, Alan. I'm still taking Etienne ahead of Najee Harris. And I think that there's the devil's advocate argument to this is the first healthy offseason Etienne has had, where, he's trying to recover from everything. This year he's healthy, and maybe he's going to be a per touch, extremely efficient per touch, and maybe Bigsby actually makes him more efficient. But I hate those kind of arguments where it's could be less volume, but the efficiency could be better. I hate those kind of arguments. I want the volume. And like Matt said, if we could just hear, Doug Peterson say, hey, we got to get Etienne the ball more as a receiver, like I think that would make everybody's, hopes go back up. But I don't know. It seems like it's kind of a slow drip for the summer where it's going to be kind of a constant guy that gets built up. Those guys don't always hit, and Etienne could start returning value for redraft people, and maybe people get a discount in Dynasty. But I think it's going to be a slow Tank Bigsby drip all summer long, and it's not cool. It kind of sucks when you're rostering a Travis Etienne and
annoying.
You want more, and you know the talent's there. The talent is there.
We have a serious situation developing in Dynasty. This is why I love talking about Dynasty with you guys, because in redraft, Jimmy Garoppolo, it doesn't mean anything in your single quarterback leagues. Like, he's on the waiver wire. He's not getting drafted even in best ball, right? Because right now, there's an out for the Raiders before the season starts if his foot is not well. And on the roster in Superflex Dynasty leagues, I see, people that just skip on quarterback, taking Garoppolo, thinking he's safe. I don't think you could do that if you're doing a startup right now, guys. I'll start with Matt Kelly here. Right now, only on the roster, they have Brian Hoyer, who projects more of a player coach, and then you have Aiden O'Connell, the rookie was taken in the 4th round. Maybe the starting quarterback for 2023 isn't even on the roster, Carson Wentz. So unwind the Raiders quarterback situation and what you think this does for Devontae Adams in Dynasty Fantasy Football, Matt.
Well, didn't Jared Stidham play well? What happened to Jared Stidham?
He's on the Broncos. He's on the Broncos.
They really need him.
Well, he was one of the
Raiders
first,
fucked up letting Stidham go.
He was one of the first signings in free agency.
Chase Garbers is the other guy?
No, it's Aiden O'Connell and Brian Hoyer.
I think Chase Garbers is also on the practice squad. This is what we're talking about. So Aiden O'Connell's a guy you have to draft in Superflex?
Oh,
this is where we're at?
Yes, and you should be taking him in the 4th round of your rookie drafts, which before that he was going like at the end of the 5th.
We moved him up like right after the draft, Matt. Like, we moved him up, and we didn't think we'd have this sort of foresight that Jimmy Garoppolo would be injured. But like, Aiden O'Connell was a mega producer at Purdue. His stats are ridiculous. He has a little bit of size, and he's older. He's 24 years old. So
he's
I think
pro ready.
He's Brock Purdy. This year's Brock Purdy, Theo, right?
I think it could also be, guys, this could be the bridge to, Caleb Williams or Drake May. And when you get off the plane in Vegas, you walk out and there's a, 300-foot, billboard for Caleb Williams and selling tickets. And this could be like really, really bad. This could be Aiden O'Connell starting all year long. This could be just bad, Alan. Like, I'm more optimistic about Aiden O'Connell than most, but you're talking about having to put a day 3 pick out on the field for versus Brian Hoyer's not going to start game 1.
No,
like Brian Hoyer is dust. He's
a player
dust.
Coach type of thing, like Josh McCown at the end.
I still don't know how they let this happen. I don't know how the Raiders let this happen. It's just gross negligence. Well, I'll probably talk to Anand Nanduri on the decision point about it. But yeah, his 3rd year, the post-COVID year, 2021, Aiden O'Connell, 3,700 yards, 8.4 yards an attempt, 72% completion percentage, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. We had the good touchdown-interception ratio that we're looking for. He regressed in his final year, but this gives me very Davis Mills vibes, major Davis Mills vibes.
Yeah.
That's a good. I
think that's a fair comparison right there for Aiden O'Connell,
which is fine. Which is good value in Superflex, absolutely.
Meaning you should be drafting him in the, as the quarterback 35 or 34. Would you rather have him or Sam Darnold in a Superflex startup draft, guys?
Sam Darnold.
Come on.
Yeah.
Okay. Come
on, but Alan, I think Alan, you hit the nail on the head that if you have a rookie draft coming up, grab Aiden O'Connell. It's the law of scarcity in Superflex leagues where if Aiden O'Connell's the starter, even if he's a bad starter, you're going to be able to flip him for a 2nd rounder and you use a 4th rounder on him. Thune on Arizona is kind of the same argument. Like, these super cheap quarterbacks that no one wants that have a path to starting as a rookie. Those are just, you flip them in.
Right. Like, those are the type of guys that if they're named the starter, Aiden O'Connell, you might be able to squeeze someone like a Jahan Dotson off someone's roster if that's their 5th wide receiver. Something like that is the best outcome you can possibly hope for.
Not me. I'm a Jahan Dotson truther, Alan. But
you know what
a
I'm
lot
saying.
Of managers. Yes. You're for a long-term wide receiver or maybe a promising tight end or just a 2nd round pick and have more bullets for next year.
There's so many backup quarterbacks that they could have gone Garoppolo. They could have Garoppolo and Taylor Heineke. Like
Wentz is out there.
Yeah, they got to sign Wentz. Wentz in the final rounds of a Superflex draft. They would have to do that. I can't believe they signed Hoyer. I can't believe Hoyer's still in the league. It doesn't make sense.
Matt Ryan, 38-year-old Matt Ryan is out there.
We're in a Superflex draft right now, and I think that Aiden O'Connell pick is gonna come soon. I saw someone trade up, by the way, in this draft that Alan and I are in. Someone traded up for Alexander Mattison relatively early. What do y'all think about that? Because Alexander Mattison, as far as I can tell, is a backup running back as of 12 o'clock in the afternoon on May 30th.
I'll let Theo do the breakdown, but the best thing you could say about Mattison is that he got a real running back contract that's good for 2 years. Like, what is it, about $4 million a year? I'm off the top of my head. So that's real. That's starter money in this economy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have, our player profiler, Alexander Mattison page, and Matt and I were trying to figure out, when you go on a game-by-game breakdown, it's kind of like a DFS take lock on a guy, where you remember that week where he had hit that 30-point game. Like, Alexander Mattison certainly has been able to have big weeks in the NFL.
He was chalking, though. See, that's the thing. The thing that you have to remember is
it's $2 million.
Alexander Mattison has a reputation of being good chalk, of delivering when his ownership is like 40% in DFS and he goes out and has a 25-point week. Nothing super efficient, but he commands the 8 targets, gets you the 6 catches, gets you the touchdown, gets you your 26 fantasy points, and it's great chalk. And everyone in cash had to have Alexander Mattison. That's been the case for consecutive seasons now. And that player is going to have prestige in fantasy football, even if it's just a week here, a week there. It's a completely different context to be performing every week in a starter's role. The efficiency metrics are underwhelming for Alexander Mattison, both as a receiver, his yards per route run, not impressive, and as a runner. So he's not creating a lot of yards on his own. He is one of the perfect sort of third-round, cardboard cutout, backup NFL running back. Like that's who he is. So that is not, right? That is not someone that I would be investing heavily in Dynasty. I wouldn't want to have huge exposure to that guy. I wouldn't want to be using a lot of draft capital and startups on that guy. I wouldn't be trading for that guy. Okay, this is a similar situation to a Gabriel Davis, a Kadarius Toney, in that their role is fragile. And what's hilarious is that the role hasn't even materialized and you have people trading up for him. It hasn't even happened yet, and it might not even happen.
I think that it not even happening would be a better bet than even if it does materialize.
It'd be funny.
It'd
be funny if it doesn't happen.
There's not.
I would laugh. I would. As someone with no Mattison, I would laugh.
It probably is going to not happen. Dalvin Cook's probably going to stay there. He sees how lonely it is with the Leonard Fournettes, Kareem Hunts, and Zeke. They're sitting there waiting for that phone to ring. He would just be another one of those 4 guys.
And
laughing.
You've seen this, these guys, Matt, we talked about this in the pre-show, where these guys who have never received, opportunities, and then it's like, oh, okay, this is the next man in thing. That's not how it works in the NFL. Like, they have interesting second and they have interesting running backs behind Alexander Mattison, in Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride. And there's also, guys on the street right now that they could bring in if Dalvin Cook moves on. Like last year in Kevin O'Connell's first season at the helm, Alexander Mattison had 74 carries in 17 games. And he never had more than 10 carries in a game last season. He gets these big spike weeks occasionally when Dalvin Cook misses. But if you are a very, very talented running back, this is throughout the NFL, you get weekly touches. You might not get a ton of weekly touches, but you should be a bet to get weekly touches. Like, Madison's the kind of guy that if Dalvin Cook was missing, you put him in your lineup. But if Dalvin Cook plays, there was no time where you want Alexander Mattison in your flex or in your RB2 spot. And there's certainly like, I just don't believe in it. He's had one season where he had more than 30 receptions, so he can catch the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
But he's never had more than 134 carries in 4 years in the NFL. So for that kind of guy to go to 250 this year is incredibly wishful thinking, even if Dalvin Cook's not there.
Yeah, I mistakenly said before $4 million. The total contract was about that. His average salary is $2.2 million, which again, and you had to think that there might have been a free agent market
even
for
in
him.
this economy, Alan. That's not starter money,
right? And that's why
we should
I'm
put
making
that.
the
We should put that quote up there. That just blatant lie that you told, that fake news story that you told. I can't. That's all. This show traffics in our show social media page is traffics in fake news. And in blatant lies.
But you have to wonder why Mattison wanted to stay. You have to figure he had been told that there was going to be a serious role for him because he was a free agent, free to go wherever. I'm sure he could have gotten.
Well, no, I don't know about that. So the whole thing was this offseason, like you could make a bunch of arguments. Like you can make a bunch of arguments here. Like if the market was super in fuego for Alexander Mattison, then he would have gone out and tested it instead of just re-signing.
He'd be the starting running back for the Carolina Panthers right now.
Yeah, and like Miles Sanders, I got you. Yeah.
He's not
Minnesota.
He's not that guy. It's arguable that he's the second best running back on that team. That's not for sure. It's also possible he's the fourth best. That he's not better than Ty Chandler. I think Ty Chandler's faster. Ty Chandler's a more explosive slasher. If you're going to be deploying a change of pace back behind Dalvin Cook, Chandler's the perfect change of pace back because he runs a 4.37. You put him in there for 8 carries a game, and he's a totally different dynamic and a different speed that the defense has to adjust to from Dalvin to an even more explosive player. Alexander Madison's just a lesser version of Dalvin Cook across the board. And as a runner, Dwayne McBride looked like he was a prolific between the tackles runner in college, better than Mattison ever was at Boise State. So, jeez.
All right. Well, that's.
I think there's I'm open to the arguments that anyone wants to make in the chat and in the comments. I'm open to any arguments at all that Madison's the fourth best running back on the Vikings.
And also it could very easily, Matt, you just mentioned like these young running backs. This could just become a committee backfield where it wasn't a committee backfield because Dalvin Cook is a very talented player, but there's no reason that can't change this year.
Oh,
so
I was laughing the hardest at that when I see people where they're drafting Alexander Mattison. I'm like, well, congratulations. Like you got yourself a committee back once Dalvin Cook is traded because there's no way he's good enough to command a workhorse role. It's not going to happen. Yes, on a week-to-week basis, when Dalvin Cook is injured and he's getting all the practice reps heading into week 15, he's going to start and he's going to get 25 touches. Yes. But when we had the whole offseason to figure it out and training camp, and he's going to have to go up against Dwayne McBride in drills and have to go up against Ty Chandler and let these coaches decide what they want the touch distribution to be, it's not going to be Mattison more than 50% of the touches. That's not what's going to happen. It would be like 50, 30, 20. That's how it would break down. And then those touches that Madison's getting are going to be a lot of between the 20s touches that you don't even want.
Yeah, the Dynasty takeaway, guys, is I think that you should roster all of these guys, even, Chandler, see how it shakes out, especially at their costs. And you could have gotten Ty Chandler in the 23rd round of your Dynasty startup, and then all of a sudden he's named the starter, and you're like, wow, got it.
Here's my Vikings Dynasty rostership hierarchy. I have more McBride than anybody.
The rookie.
I have a bunch of Chandler. I have a little bit of Dalvin Cook and no Mattison.
Yeah. That's based on
FFPC, I took a ton of Chandler, Alan, because like the veterans were available. And McBride's a guy that I really, really, really liked. I didn't like where he was drafted, but Chandler was basically free in those FFPC drafts behind McBride. And I've seen a couple of sharp people flip some Mattison shares because I think people are trying to get ahead of this. A lot of bad things could happen. Dalvin Cook could make up with Minnesota. You could see another veteran land in Minnesota. You could get some buzz about the guys Matt just talked about in camp and make it look like there was more threats to Mattison than maybe people see now.
Yeah, the Ty
so many
Chandler
bad things could
breakaway
happen.
run in preseason is so already happened. It's already happened.
he was I remember he was a good runner at North Carolina, right? That's where he went to school. That was
runs a 4.37.
Yeah.
Yep, North Carolina. And there was people like there was a Ty Chandler hive last year. Like in this time in the preseason, it just didn't really happen. And then there's like 1 year in the system. This is a back that O'Connell brought in. It was early in his tenure. You have McBride, and now you have McBride this year, excuse me, and Chandler last year. So you have like these two kind of guys in the wings that are very interesting for this year, that are cheap and super cheap.
All right, I like that take from all here on the Vikings running backs. And, another strategy in fantasy football that I've deployed in Dynasty is fading injury optimism, and you're usually going to make money on that. Sometimes you'll lose. A couple years ago, I was fading Joe Burrow, and he ended up being an elite quarterback. But last year, J.K. Dobbins. This year, 2 years after the injury, Michael Gallup is now getting some good buzz. Finally. He is being drafted as the third wide receiver after CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. Are you guys buying into the positive talk about Michael Gallup for Dynasty leagues now?
No, not really. No, not really at all. Like,
we liked him before this injury. Yeah, he was popular,
Yeah. But Michael Gallup had like his best season now several years ago. So you're kind of it would be a win for Michael Gallup if he could get back to 10 points per game. But I don't see that happening this year. I think Brandon Cooks is a real threat to him. Like, Brandon Cooks has been a productive guy everywhere he's gone, and CeeDee Lamb is an alpha. And also you have the fact that if Tony Pollard's on the field more snaps, by definition, they're going to target running backs more. So I think that it's difficult for me to see the number 3 wide receiver like retaining a lot of value in Dallas this year with Gallup. But I mean, I don't dislike the talent. I just think the situation might be overblown in terms of like what he could actually give us this year.
I dislike the talent. I don't see why I'm supposed to care about him. He has average athleticism. He was an average college producer. He played until he was a senior after being a JUCO transfer. He had one big year with no target competition. Then the following year, what did he do? 2020 is the year to look at with Michael Gallup. 16 games played, 105 targets, and with those 105 targets, he had like a 50% catch rate, led the league in drops, put up 10.8 fantasy points per game, which ranked number 48 in the NFL among wide receivers for fantasy points in a fully healthy year where he had plenty of opportunity and he face planted. Then in the next year, he had to work through injuries, had a calf injury. Then he had the week 17 ACL tear, which threw out his 2022 season. I mean, just like with Jameson Williams, yes, he came back and he was a decoy. We talked about that. But that was also because he had a January ACL tear. So he was never going to be 100%, or they were never going to ask him to do a lot of cutting in 2022. Same thing with Gallup. They basically said, hey, run straight down the field and we'll see what happens. Dak will throw it up to you once in a while. So I think he'll be better. I'm excited for this offense. This is going to be one of the best offenses in the league. I think Dak is a great MVP bet. I just drafted Brandon Cooks in the startup that we're in. I would have gone Gallup too if he were available later. I just want pieces of this offense. I want Gallup late. I want Jake Ferguson. I want all these guys late because I want pieces of this offense. But it's not because, I think he's a post-hype guy that's going to, find his 2019 form. 2019 was a fake season for Michael Gallup. He's not that guy. He's an 800-yard-a-year guy. But in deep leagues, like this one startup that Alan and I are in, it's 3 receivers and 4 flex. And you just want guys that start on good offenses with some semblance of ability, and that's what Michael Gallup is.
Yeah, he's locked into his contract, though, for this year and next. They can't really get out of it until 25. So, Theo, would you rather have someone like Gallup or someone going a few picks after him on the wide receiver dynasty ranks like Isaiah Hodgins or the rookie Michael Wilson? How would you juxtapose them with those guys?
I would rather have Michael Wilson than Michael Gallup because we haven't, the unknown upside of Wilson, the immediate opportunity for Wilson to be on the field a lot. We liked him at the Senior Bowl. We liked the profile. Like, I think Gallup's kind of a known thing. Hodgins is an interesting question.
Wilson and Gallup are the same guy, right? Wilson and Gallup are the same guy. It's just that Wilson has a wide open depth chart ahead of him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a knee injury and all this baggage and all these drops, right? So we're talking about a third-round pick who was a senior coming out with prototypical size and average athleticism. These are very similar players. It's just that one guy you get a fresh start with. The other guy is sort of an overcooked chicken at this point. Like, he's a very dusty 28-year-old or 27-year-old, right?
Gallup
I thought he was 27. I thought he was 28. He's actually 27. That's perfect, right? That encapsulates Michael Gallup. I thought he was 28. He's actually 27, but he plays like he's 31.
All right,
there you go, Alan.
Yeah, no,
that might be the last time. That might be the last time we talk about Michael Gallup.
I don't think so.
Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast.
Well, let me ask you this: if I mean, this is kind of like an obvious question, but if there was, say, like an injury to one of the other guys, would that? I mean, obviously we're going to raise him at that point, but you're not like exploding him. You're not like pumped about Gallup, is what I'm gathering. Even if there was like a Brandon Cooks injury and he's going to miss 4 or 5 games,
you cannot talk yourself into Michael Gallup under any circumstances.
All right.
And it's very format dependent, right? So I could see someone leaning Gallup when you start 5 receivers, 6 receivers. But if it's any shallower than that, I want Michael Wilson. I want upside. I want youth. I'm not drafting these overcooked turkeys. No way.
Yeah. Put in the chat right now if you would draft Michael Gallup in your startup draft, and if you would, just put what round or what number receiver you would take him. And if not, just say complete fade. That's totally good. We'll look in the chat to see what people are saying. Guys, I'm going to bring this up, I think, every other week because I'm fascinated by the San Francisco 49ers quarterback situation. This is one of the best offenses for fantasy.
By the way, Alan, you drafted Michael Gallup in the league we're in before Michael Wilson, just so you know. Just so the chat knows, so everybody knows, so Theo knows. Because of the depth of the starting roster, Allen went Gallup. Yeah. Would you go back and change it to Michael Wilson?
Yes.
We got it, Theo.
That's good. That's good. Good argument.
Changing minds, man.
Yeah. And it's
we're changing the world one drafter at a time, Matt. It's
so easy to see Michael Wilson being that rookie that like the Terry McLaurin of this year, right? The guy drafted in the later rounds of the real NFL draft that ends up being a serious fantasy asset, given that DeAndre Hopkins isn't there anymore. I'm into Michael Wilson as one of the better picks in your rookie drafts in the 4th round.
It's a fun 3rd round group of wide receivers. Like, I'm not advocating that these are guys that we need to go out and draft in our rookie drafts. Like, I think we're accurate where we have them, but Wilson's one of like a group of guys who is going to be on the field right away. It's a fun year. Like, it's a really fun year for these 3rd round wide receivers.
And you guys love them at the Senior Bowl too, and I trust your evaluation there. Let's go over to San Francisco 49ers quarterbacks, because I just can't even believe, like, it doesn't matter if you're playing best ball, if you're playing Dynasty. Trey Lance, he started off in the 2nd round when we were doing startups in February in Superflex leagues, of course. 4th round, 5th round, 8th round, and then he's just sitting there. He's like, it's like a real draft room with like the green room when the guy doesn't get drafted. And Brock Purdy, who by all accounts is still going to be the starter if he's healthy, he even goes after him. And then Sam Darnold is now looked at as one of the premium handcuff quarterbacks who could start a handful of games this year, guys. So let's start with Theo here. Just, prediction. You don't know anything yet at this point, but who do you think is going to be the likely week 1 starter? And what is going to be the long-term outlook for dynasty drafters taking Trey Lance in like that 6th to 9th round of their Superflex startup drafts?
I hate this whole situation. I hate it, Alan. I honestly don't have a week 1 bet. I would not be shocked if it's Darnold in week 1. Like I have a Brock Purdy team. Okay, a Superflex dynasty team. And today I was offered Trey Lance and a 2024 third for Dameon Pierce and a 2024 second. And like a couple months ago, I'm so excited to make that trade. And now it's like, is Trey Lance ever going to get on the field? It's such a wild. I think it's going to be Purdy starts the most games for any 49ers quarterback this year. Yeah. That'll be my bet. Who starts
Matt
week
Kelly.
1? I don't know.
Yeah, Matt, you sound as confused as I am about it, but Matt Kelly, I traded away Trey Lance and got back Jordan Love in a second about a month ago. You like that trade for me, right? In the Superflex league?
At this point, yeah.
Yeah.
Jordan Love's going to be the starter. Yeah. We know what he is. Does Trey Lance have a higher ceiling? Absolutely. I think week 1's going to be Trey Lance. I really do. I think what the most likely scenario is that Trey Lance starts week 1. Trey Lance face plants and is replaced in week 3 with Darnold. And then they roll him back out like in week 5 because, again, the grip has been fixed again. Like they refixed the grip. The grip was fixed, remember? And then the throwing motion's been fixed. And they had to go back and refix it again. And then they fix it again. And then it's back to Darnold. And then Darnold has a terrible game, like a horrific game, just as the word is getting out that Purdy has been throwing and he's cleared and he's been practicing for a couple weeks. Week 11, rest of the season, it's Purdy.
Big cop.
That's
Brock
how I
to the
see it
rescue.
playing out. I see Lance for 3 games, Darnold for 5 games, and then Purdy for the rest of the season.
All right.
The Lance one though, like if Matt's right and it is Lance week 1, it's pretty easy. Like Lance can hang on to the job by winning. That's the path for Lance.
It's very possible.
That's the possibility. So in Matt's scenario where Lance starts week 1, I don't know. He might be worth the risk to try to trade for, but I don't know. I can't get there. I just can't get there. It's such a messed up situation because we love so many of the offensive weapons in San Francisco, and we don't have any, clue who's going to be the starter week 1 right now.
I'm this close. I just need one shred of something from Kyle Shanahan. I need something. He's got to give me something. He's got to give me a crumb. He's got to give me a shred. He's got to give me a teardrop of hope. Something he has to give me that is like, okay, I'm allowing myself to get hurt. Right? Kyle Shanahan has that power right now. He has that power over a lot of us. He just needs to say something good. He needs to say something good. Like the grip thing wasn't enough. Kyle Shanahan coming out and saying, well, because of the broken hand, it changes grip, which then changes throwing motion, and there's all these downstream consequences from the hand injury. I didn't buy it. It didn't ring true. Fantasy gamers weren't buying it. But there is something that he could say that we would buy. And when that happens, I'd be fascinated to see what happens with Trey Lance. And I'll probably be with the crowd on that. I'll probably be back in. I'm guessing Allen is going to be out for no matter what happens.
I mean, I'm taking Sam Darnold in all these Superflex leagues. I'm banking on him being the week 1 starter for a month, and then hoping that I could, move him for something decent because he's going to light it up. So
what we've talked about on this show is that a very likely scenario is that Sam Darnold is who Kyle Shanahan actually wants to succeed here because he wants to show the world that he can elevate a 7th round quarterback. He's done that already with Purdy. Now he can resuscitate and completely rejuvenate a top 3 bust. So if he can do both of those things, then he that will help him in his quest to be on the Mount Rushmore of offensive coaches, if he's not already, according to some people. So then you could see him just riding Darnold because he wants, for his own ego, to show the world that, yes, we can win with Darnold.
Egomaniac factor.
Right.
That's going to play into it.
It's to serve his ego first and foremost. You cannot underrate Kyle Shanahan's ego. When you're factoring all these things in, you have to keep in mind just how outsized this guy's ego is.
Yeah, Theo said something really interesting when we talked about Darnold last time. He said, could this be what happened to Ryan Tannehill, where, everyone wrote him off, this horrible QB, and then goes to another team and becomes a top 12 fantasy quarterback one year. And now, obviously his value is diminished, but he had a nice 2-3 year run for fantasy. Guys, before we get on to the rest of our topics and just close out the show, why don't we tell everyone what's going on with the Player Profiler seasonal draft kit that it should be dropping any day if it's not available right now?
No, it's not available yet. We're still finishing it off, but it's just fantastic. We're just this morning, Matt's emailing with our fantastic graphics person. Shout out to Cody Wilhelm for all of the hard work he's putting in with these videos. We have multiple Player Profiler staff members provided cameo appearances, breaking down some of these players. Matt did a fantastic one for Jamar Chase. Matt did a great Rashad Bateman one. I complimented you last show, Alan. You did Bijan Robinson and Travis Kelce. I've recorded a few. I have a few more to go, but it's dropping very soon. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really, really, really excited for it. This is definitely crunch time, but it's exciting. It's like a big collaborative effort, and it's finally coming together, and we're so excited about what's going to come out.
Theo, you can get a draft kit anywhere. In fact, I still do. I buy 2 or 3 draft kits, but Matt, tell everyone why specifically all the work that Theo's putting into this, why the Player Profiler draft kit is one of that they must have.
Well, so it combines everything you would want. Like in the old school magazines, what I loved the magazines was that you had the cheat sheets at the beginning, and then you had the player breakdowns, and I wanted to bring all of that and more into an online user experience. And so it does feel like a publication, like the graphics that Theo talked about with our team insights. We have our signature trends, which are basically the singular aspect of a team that we saw last year develop as a trend that will affect them and be fantasy relevant this year. It could be pace of play. It could be a change in personnel, a change in philosophy. So we identify that key aspect of every single team. The team insights and the team breakdowns are, I think, the best in the industry. And then our cheat sheet is actually dynamic in that there are player write-ups and player videos embedded in the cheat sheet. So you could scroll down the cheat sheet and you can go super flex, you can go tight end premium. We're going to have Theo's cheat sheet available. We're going to have Billy's cheat sheet available. But you can also just, download it to print for your draft, or, you can actually open each panel and get all the details. And so it's very unique in that way. There's no other draft kit like it. And this year we've added a commissioner's tab with a lot of helpful hints and tricks and a whole sort of guide system for commissioners, which we're excited about, and that's going to be presented by the folks at Trophy Smack. So we're super excited about this whole initiative.
Now, you hope that everyone subscribes to Player Profiler, guys, but if they want, let's say they're not a subscribing member, they just want to get the draft kit. Are they able to do that, or do they have to subscribe first and then get it? To explain to everybody how it works.
You can sign up just for the draft kit. It's $45. I know it's not the cheapest draft kit, but it's not supposed to be. Our stuff is never the cheapest.
That's fair price right there. If you can buy anyone's rankings on Patreon for $6, but a draft, like a true draft kit, should be around $50 to $60. So I would actually say this is under market.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna be adding even more features. Like we're gonna be updating the format of the cheat sheet. We're gonna be doing some cool stuff just in the next few weeks. And so you could also sign up for the all-in package. So what happens on Player Profiler is the individual subscriptions, like the Dynasty Deluxe, the draft kit, those are $45. And then as soon as you want to buy more than 2, you can get the whole thing. You can get all 5 of our various packages for $135. So basically how the pricing works is you buy 3, you get 2 free. That's the way our pricing is structured.
Anything else to add before we move on to our last bit of content, Theo?
No, I'm just excited about it. I'm sure we'll be able to talk about it a little bit more next week, and I appreciate you two getting me your cameos in a timely manner and such high quality work from you two guys. It was awesome.
Theo is just a workhorse. I mean, the number of hours this guy's put in on this is insane.
Well, he loves it.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's also like once you get started with it, you kind of want to see it to the end, and it's energizing when you get a guy like Matt Kelly giving me Jamar Chase, Matt Harmon sending in Chris Olave, Billy Muzio breaking down Amon-Ra St. Brown last night. I mean, Justin Herzig from Established to Run sending in Lamar Jackson. I mean, it's such a collaborative effort, not just player profiler, staff members, but across the industry. There's a lot of I take a lot of responsibility and pride for being able to like spearhead it and run it because it's so good, and we want to keep that quality. We want to build on it.
Theo, who's been the biggest pain in the ass to work with out of all the people?
Oof, I'll give a shout out to the most tardy player profiler person is definitely Dario. Dario owes me a Devonta Smith write up, and Dario owes me a Devonta Smith write up and a Devonta Smith cameo. And I asked Dario to maybe do two, and I don't think he's gonna be able to. I think we've just got to concentrate on Devonta Smith. So shout out to my boy Dario. Who did
Nate List write up?
Nate List did not participate this year, Matt. No Nate List. No Nate List.
That's just too bad.
Josh. Player profiler alumni. Definitely a shout out to Josh Larkey for Jonathan Taylor. That was great.
Yeah. By the way, yep. Good stuff there. All right, guys, let's close with a little bit of with one more topic. Matt Kelly, off the top of your head, just name who are the last two quarterbacks drafted in most startups. The last two starting quarterbacks, I meant. Guys that we know have jobs. Shout it out quickly. Don't overthink it. Who are the last two starting quarterbacks drafted in most Superflex startups?
Sam Howell and Jimmy Garoppolo?
No, well, Garoppolo probably will be now. Theo, do you want to guess? You're wrong on both. Top of your head. Snap call. Come on.
I would have guessed Sam Howell as well, so I'll defer to you, Alan.
Yeah, no, he goes because he's the upside unknown guy.
Youth.
Yeah, it's Ryan Tannehill and Mac Jones. Those guys are the ones that nobody wants.
Not startups I've been in. Mac Jones?
He's once again in the one that we're in. He was the last starting quarterback to go, other than Tannehill. Those were the last two in ours. Those were the last two in the Jack's $250 chair startup. I'm talking about the guys we know have jobs, and I'm not counting Garoppolo.
Are you counting Desmond Ridder?
Yeah, he goes ahead of those guys. He goes ahead of
Ridder. Ridder, there's a little bit of a quiet confidence with Ridder dynasty managers right now because I think Atlanta's going to win some games this year.
You want to put some, So those are the last two guys. We understand why Tannehill's there because is the last one, but Matt Jones is the one that I think that it was bad last year. But I want to start with Theo this time. What do you think the chances are? Give me like a percentage chance that he's a top 18 quarterback, 15, a percentage chance that he's not even starting by week 7. And, does he deserve to be QB 31 in these startups is really what my question is.
No, I would have him higher than that. I would have him considerably higher than 31. Your first question was, does he hit a top 15
top
season?
18, yeah, something like that. With Bill O'Brien now as the OC.
I would say percentage-wise, maybe 50%. I think that he's got a chance. I don't think it's as bad. I think the offense is going to be better than people think with Bill O'Brien. I don't think it's going to be like a bottom 5 offense. So I think he has a chance to beat what you're giving him. And I think that they're going to be a little bit better than people think. I think the division is very difficult, but I think that he's got an opportunity to maintain his role as the starter next year. I'm not ready to completely bury Mac Jones, despite the Bailey Zappi presence and despite, Bill Belichick, not necessarily being, behind the scenes really, really crazy about him. I think that he's not awful. And I don't know. I'll put not awful as my biggest compliment to Mac Jones. Matt, where are you at for Mac Jones?
68% completion percentage, 3,800 yards passing as a rookie. after a completely dominant college career where he's putting up 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns and 4 interceptions at Alabama. He's good. He's good, and he is a screaming value in Superflex. I can't believe how far he's fallen. It makes no sense. Like, you would rather have Mac Jones or Will Levis.
Well, Levis goes way ahead of him, just so you know.
Which
like
doesn't make
10
any
spots.
sense.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense. Like, Will Levis is like the Kadarius Toney of wide receivers. Like, we know that he struggles to complete actual passes in the football that he's played. So what are we talking about here? Mac Jones had an underwhelming season because Matt Patricia, with his offensive coordinator, his number one receiver was Devontae Parker. And if he wasn't throwing to Devontae Parker, it was Kendrick Bourne? What are we talking about? I would love for this guy to have a number one receiver that's not a journeyman or an undrafted possession receiver. I like, listen, as a value in fantasy football, Jacoby Myers, great. But as your primary option, your primary read, that's devastating to have those as your weapons. So you can't judge Mac Jones until he actually has a number one or proper number two receiver to throw to.
Is
I would
Thornton
love to
that
see
guy,
it.
guys? Is
Imagine
Thornton
Mac
that guy?
Jones on the Vikings. Imagine if you drop Mac Jones on the Vikings. He would be Kirk Cousins.
I think that it's interesting, a little pushback in the chat about the weapons that New England has. Matt brings it up, like Jacoby Myers, like it's a loss, but it's not like the end of the world type player to lose. I like the addition for Mike Gesicki there. I think stylistically that helps Mac Jones, and I think
Juju?
I'm not a huge Juju guy, but to think that
helps.
Juju can have a Jacoby Myers outcome there with potentially more. And I think that what's interesting is we talked about Tyquan Thornton. I think Tyquan Thornton and Pierre Strong have a lot of speed, and those two guys could get utilized into like the weekly game plan there. A lot of times those rookie guys are not trusted by Bill Belichick on a weekly basis. Year two, you could see a leap in terms of snaps. And they have Ramondre Stevenson, who's an incredibly efficient and productive running back who can catch the ball. So the fact that we have a better offensive coordinator, we have, I think the weapons will be better. They've certainly added more speed right now. To go from Jonnu Smith, more of an inline blocking role, the last year, to Mike Gesicki was an improvement. Jacoby Myers is equal, but Juju's, shown a higher ceiling, higher fantasy ceiling. And then those two second-year fast players, I think it's interesting. Shout out to the plumber. He's also the plumber. I'd like to clarify plumber because he's also ribbing me for not doing a player profiler entry. I'm doing several, so I've done some. These are my final ones, plumber. Final ones, plumber.
Plumber, come on. It's some of the worst weapons you could ever imagine. So actually, here's the thing. I'm going to be buying Mac Jones after another underwhelming season. I'm going to be on Mac Jones next year. Book it.
That's the show.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.